The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, all. Welcome to the EasyPower Tuesday Refresher. My name is Jim Chastain, and the focus of this series of webinars is to basically cover areas that may not be mainstream as far as our training, but clearly are features that are very usable based upon what you're trying to do. And the topic of producing hot work permits is one of those topics that we probably talk not enough about. And welcome everyone to the session. Hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions and give you some direction in this regard. So what we're going to do today is essentially cover in a real brief fashion what it takes to create a standard hot work permit as the tool has by default, and then go in and work through an example of where I want to customize and the reasons I want to customize a work permit process, and hopefully give you some background information on how to do this for your particular systems. So what you're going to see is that what I'm generating now requires an EasyPower Arc Flash module because that's where the data comes from, and then Microsoft Word because that's what the templates are built in and crafted, and then we use Microsoft Word to generate the output. Just as a real quick reference, NFPA 70E specifically suggests or requires that job safety planning be formalized and documented and include management oversight such that there's an understanding of what the maintenance requirements are and the hazards involved. And the point being here is if this is a feature that you require and it's built into EasyPower, there's some value added that you may be able to take advantage of. Likewise, there is a exception that has been evolving a little bit over time, but essentially there are certain tasks that don't necessarily require hot work permit generation as long as you don't cross certain boundaries. And so these are left up to you to determine, but I just wanted to point this out that these are areas that have changed slightly with the evolution of NFPA 70E. All right, what we're going to be looking at are the listing of templates. This is in the device library, and as I make adjustments, I want to make sure I'm applying these modified work permits to the right type of equipment and the right voltage range. So we're going to be working on the 480 volt system for my changes. Then what we're also going to do is point or change the pointers which are set up in EasyPower options. And if it's not a screen you're familiar with, you should locate it and understand it. But basically, when the tool is installed, it has a series of default file locations that these are all pointers that reflect what's being used by the installation. And what we're going to change is the work permit template location, which is located down here at the bottom. You'll notice also up here at the top, work permits as they're generated will be saved in in this case, the same location, but since I'm determining a different permit template, I want to make sure I change this pointer and not this pointer. Again, we'll get into that when I get into my example. All the templates are built based upon my display of information that's generated in short circuit focus. So when we generate a basic template or a basic work permit, we want to start in short circuit focus. Then we go up to the work permit icon, and based upon that, it will bring up this list of the tasks which we have delineated in the device library. We'll pick out which one of these applies to the bus that we're working on, and then based upon that, the tool will present a Word document using the template that's being pointed to by the the tool installation. So as I jump into the EasyPower, I'm going to walk through these steps in relatively quick order. But where I want to spend most of my time is on a customized work permit. And the case or the situation is, in our particular plant, we only want to do hot work under the auspices or protection of maintenance mode. So what I'm going to do is use Scenario Manager to generate a scenario which is the setup for maintenance mode, and that's the basis that I'm going to generate the hot work permit. And I'm going to make a couple comments here about the Scenario Manager. For those of you that don't use it as much as you would like, probably it's important to point out that before you start creating scenarios, you save the base case, and I'll try to point this out when we get into the tools. The situation there is, if I've saved the base case as a document or as a case in the Scenario Manager, then I can create additional scenarios using that base case. If I need to change, and this is a question that's come up in the past, if I need to change some basic element in my system, like a main or a motor or even a transformer, by doing that change, making that modification in the base case, it will then be reflected across all the different scenarios, and I don't have to recreate the scenario. So a little word to the wise. Then after I've created my scenario, I'm going to go into the device library template and change to make sure that we're utilizing the instructions, or we've changed the instructions that I want to use on the hot permit. Then we're going to link that to the maintenance mode in the tool setup, and then we're ready to generate custom hot work permits. So again, we have a system that we only want to do hot work under the auspices of maintenance mode, and we're going to use Word to create this linkage. And in the device library, we want to make sure that we link it for a number of different elements in the right voltage range so that they pick up that template as we create work permits. So let's jump into EasyPower and walk through all of this. So as I mentioned earlier, just as a real quick, if I'm going to use Scenario Manager and I want to do a new scenario, I want to make sure I've saved my base case. In this particular file, I can see by the top of the screen I have, and so I might want to continue. And the reason for doing this is just to see how many scenarios we've set up. So when I opened a new scenario, it allows me to start under scenario 1. And what I want to do is create the maintenance mode. To do that, and to create any new scenario, I can go through and change individually the components that are affected. In this case, I know since I want to use maintenance mode, I'm going to go to short circuit focus and select all the elements here. And I know I can now select maintenance mode set to on, and the tool will reflect that change. And as I go back to database edit, it's going to take those changes for me back to the database. And now I'm going to save those as maintenance mode. So I've created a new scenario. I've changed several different elements. And just to prove the point, if I go in, I'm in database edit now, and if I look at the condition of this particular breaker, I can see now if I look at the trip settings that maintenance mode, in this case RELT checkbox, is on. All right, so the only change that's been made now is for these 3 breakers. I've put maintenance mode on. I'm going to save this scenario as maintenance mode. And so now from the maintenance mode scenario, I can go to short circuit, and as I fault the buses, the tool shows me what the relative calculations are in that particular case. So these are much improved, and again, I don't want to do hot work in the system at all. unless I've done it in maintenance mode. So the next thing I want to do is go to my device library. So let's go into the library, standard lib. And what we're looking for are the work permits, arc flash work permits. Again, I want to be in the right voltage range. The only place I want to do hot work is in the low voltage, so it's going to be 200 to 600 volts. And I only wanted to apply to certain devices. So my maintenance mode affects switchgear, panel boards, MCCs, panels, and I want to assign a title. Let's say hot work in maintenance mode. And it's going to be basically no particular conditions, because it's not going to exclude or include anything. My working distance is going to be 18 inches. And I do want to have voltage rated gloves. And I do want to have voltage rated tools. And then I want to have some verbiage in the work permit itself, enforcing this statement or the condition of the system. And then I can do additional work practices that I want to have included. So now that I've made these changes, I would again make this particular one is in switchgear. I'd also make the same change in panel board, and I'm just going to set these up accordingly. Now I did make, there's another point I want to emphasize here, and that is if I'm going to be putting on special conditions, and I know the procedure requires something than the calculations for the bus itself, then I need to make that condition part of the description. So that's what I'm talking about. So again, I'd apply this to both MCCs and probably my panels. Let's go ahead and put another one on here in case I... And again, I'd include the instructions as I did on the first one. So I wouldn't just put in part of it, but you get the idea. All right, so once I've got this set up, I'm going to save this. Now, the point I was making earlier is if I go in and I want to do work on this panel board, and I'm going to have the operator is going to be reaching inside of the panel board closer than the 18 inches, I may want to have an indication of what the instant energy is at that near distance. If it, let's say his hand's within 6 inches of the arc itself, or potential arc. So what I would do is go back to my arc flash options under short circuit setup, and now in my voltage range include a description of 6 inches, a calculation of 6 inches. So let's go ahead and put that in here. And again, this is going to be information I want to use on my customized label. So at 6 inches, we're actually going to have an exposure of 17 calories on this particular bus, even though I have 3.1 calories at the 18-inch point. So that 18 calorie protection on the hands is going to be something I want to include in my work permit. So let's kind of go back to where we were. I'm going to take this off because it will interfere with my display. All right, at this point, I want to go out into my Word now and modify the document template. So I'm going to open up an existing file, which is under my installation of EasyPower. For those of you that don't know, EasyPower is installed if you just do a default installation under My Documents, in this case EasyPower 10.2, and these are all the folders that are available. What we're going to be looking at, this is a work permits folder, and I want to pick up the template for this standard template, and you want, as we generate this new template or the new document, I want to save it with another name, and so we're going to be using Jim as an example. So, but this is a standard one, and I don't want to save over it. I don't want to change over it. So there's a couple things I need to include. In the user's manual, if you look up work permits, there will be a listing of all the keywords that can be used that picks data from the database. So in this case, we're using the bus and the equipment and the task and some of these specific variables. What I want to include now is the scenario. So I'm going to include embraces, SCEN, which is the keyword that the tool looks for scenario. And I want to include in here safe work, job description. I might put in some kind of verbiage, ensure hand protection. Meets 18 calorie level. All right, I'm going to save this now. This is my template that I want to use anytime that scenario is being used. I'm going to save this as with a different name. In this case, let's call it Jim's document. I'm going to overwrite it and close this down. Now, the only thing that's left is to go back in our database edit. Now I need to change the pointer now in the setup of EasyPower file locations. I want to go in and point now with this work template down to Jim's template. So again, we're under users, EasyPower, users document, EasyPower 10.2 work permits. Instead of work permit, I'm going to use Jim's template, and we should be good to go. All right, so here's how this looks. Again, I'm in maintenance mode scenario. I'm going to pick out a single bus. Let's see if this one works. I'm going to pick out work permit. I want to pick out the hot work permit with maintenance mode and then create it. And now I see that it's picked out that scenario that we've created. We can see that our maintenance mode on is the scenario we're in. And here's our special instructions, and here's our ensure hand protection meets the upper higher level. And now the significance of this template is it can be saved, it can be created or modified in Word or printed out and then just hand written in the specifics. But then I have a check box that the operator would use to verify that things have been done. The information that's been created for that particular bus on arc flash calculations, instant energy, and then a checkbox. And because I included a couple sentences, it's pushed the balance of the checkbox down on the other. So clearly I could clean this up. But this gives us the ability now to have a checkbox in hand, a check list in hand and the ability to have management sign off as the hot work has been assigned. And we can save this now associated with the bus as a hot link, or just save a hard copy. But in any case, this will be part of, now once I've printed it out and saved it, it will be saved now in that document folder that we looked at earlier. Okay, so I ran through that kind of quick, and I apologize if I was a little too brief, but the point being now is that we can create a customized document that can be modified, and this is a scenario I'd recommend. So make sure you save the base case before you create the new scenario, whatever that may be. You want to do the document permit creation while you're in the scenario and short circuit the arc flash module. You want to make sure you make an entry in the device library for any voltage range and equipment listing that this particular permit will apply to. Utilize Microsoft Word to customize and save, and I recommend saving it as a unique name so you can reuse the template basic to make others as you need them. Make sure you go into EasyPower options and change the file pointer to use that new template, and then you're prepared to create the hot work permit anytime you're in that particular scenario. Okay, again, this is something that's relatively straightforward if you have gone through it a couple times. If you've got questions, I encourage you to utilize tech support. And it does look like I got a couple questions here. Let me see if I can. The question is, how can I include the breaker setting the arc flash is based on? So that's part of the, it's a good question. Let me see if I can. Let me jump back into EasyPower, and what it comes down to is if I look at the user's manual, and that's available with this little question mark at the top, you can either access the user's manual or the user's guide from the start page. So let's kind of do it that way. And so the question relates to what other elements in the database can be put on the work permit. So I'm going to go to the EasyPower's guide. I'm going to look up, I think permit is the keyword I'm looking for. Here's where it's generated, and right here should be the list of variables that I can include. Give me a second. There you go. So these are all the variables. So what you're asking for is the upstream. Well, I'm not finding what you're asking, but this is where it's got to be. And if it's not on here, I need to go back and find out why it's not. The fact is, we should be able to pull out any variable from the data sheet, and we should be able to give you exactly, because this is included in the label. So let me work on that and get back to you. But I think that's a good input. All right. Sorry for stumbling on that one, but we'll get back to you. And I invite you all to check in with tech support. If you have other questions, keep track of the website, because we have updates on the locations for regional training, some new locations for Arc Flash workshops, and upcoming webinars. Thank you for attending today, and have a nice rest of the day.